Why do you think I came all this way?
What if the most dangerous character in Game of Thrones never once swung a sword? What if the boy who fell from a tower, the boy who lost the use of his legs, the boy everyone pitied and carried and protected across frozen wastelands, what if he was the one pulling the strings the entire time? Not a pawn, not a prophet, an architect. Sit with that for a moment, because once you see it, truly see it, you cannot unsee it. Bran Stark, quiet, still watching, became something that doesn't have a name in any human language. The Three-Eyed Raven, a being who exists outside of time the way you exist inside a room. He doesn't just see the past, he's in it. Present inside moments that already happened, a ghost standing in a memory that is somehow still breathing. And here is the question that should unsettle you. If you could see everything that ever happened, everything that is happening right now, and everything that will happen, and you chose to say nothing, what does that make you? There's a word for that. Several, actually. None of them are kind. Let's go back to the beginning. Not Bran's beginning, further. To the Mad King, Aerys Targaryen, a man who started his reign with promise and ended it hearing voices. He sat on the Iron Throne muttering, "Burn them all," like a broken record, like a man haunted by something only he could hear. His own small council thought he'd lost his mind. Meisters chalked it up to madness, inbreeding, paranoia, and maybe that's all it was. But what if it wasn't? Bran, as the Three-Eyed Raven, has demonstrated the ability to enter the minds of other creatures. He greenseers into animals, ravens, wolves, bears. He inhabits Hodor's mind so completely that a young, healthy stable boy gets trapped inside a single traumatic loop and carries it for the rest of his life. Hold the door, hold the door. Hodor. That one act of mental possession by a child, Bran, an accident, mind you, a moment of panic and desperation, rewrites an entire human being's existence. Now imagine what a fully realized Three-Eyed Raven could do. Cersei once said that when you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. But Bran isn't playing. Bran is watching the board from a vantage point where every move has already been made and every outcome has already been decided. And he is choosing, very deliberately, what to act on and what to let burn. The Tower of Joy. You know this scene, you felt it. Ned Stark stands at the base of that tower, and for a fleeting, impossible moment, he hears something. A voice. He turns. And Bran, watching from his vision, calls out.
Father!
Just once. Just loud enough to exist. And Ned Stark, a man who should not be able to hear anything because this is a memory, a thing already done and sealed in time, Ned turns toward the sound. The show treats it like a curiosity, a detail. Isn't that something? The camera seems to say, and then it moves on. But stop there. Stop right at that moment where Ned's head turns. Because what that scene is telling you, quietly, without fanfare, without a dramatic score swelling underneath it, is that Bran Stark can reach into the past and make dead men flinch. He can touch history, and if he can touch it, he can shape it. The old Three-Eyed Raven tells him this directly. The past is already written. The ink is dry. You cannot change it. But can you trust a man who has spent centuries warging into ravens and watching the world from the inside of a tree to tell you the absolute truth about what is and isn't possible? Because here's what the show never quite resolves. If the ink is dry, why does Ned turn? Go back further. Go back to Aerys, a king hearing whispers. Whispering, "Burn them all." A man driven to the edge of reason by voices in his head that no one around him could hear. Bran went back to that time. Bran warged into the past during those sessions with the old Raven, saw the wildfire, saw the plots, saw the fall of the Targaryen dynasty like a tragedy he already knew the ending to. Is it possible, even a little, even in the dark corners where the show doesn't shine a light, that Bran whispered too loudly into a moment he shouldn't have touched? Is it possible that Aerys heard him? Is it possible that some fragment of the Three-Eyed Raven's presence lodged itself in the Mad King's mind the way a splinter lodges under skin? Invisible, maddening, impossible to name? We don't know. And that's the point. Bran has become something that exists in the uncertainty. He floats in the space between "this happened" and "I made this happen," and the show never draws the line clearly. deliberately. Because the moment you draw that line, you have to answer for it. And answering for it means looking at Bran Stark on the Iron Throne and asking what he sacrificed to sit there. Because he does sit there. He ends up on the throne. The boy who fell. The boy who said, "I can't be Lord of Winterfell, I'm the Three-Eyed Raven." A statement that should have removed him from all political considerations forever, somehow becomes king of the Six Kingdoms. And when Tyrion Lannister makes the case for him, the argument he makes is this: Bran holds the memory of the world. He is the story. That's not a political argument. That's a coronation speech for a god. And gods don't become gods by accident. Think about what Bran does not do throughout the entire final seasons. He sits in his chair. He stares. Occasionally he says something cryptic that sounds meaningful but commits to nothing. He tells people, "I don't really want any more," like a man who has already eaten, already satisfied, already done with hunger because he got exactly what he needed. He knows Arya will be the one to kill the Night King. He gives her the dagger. His dagger. The catspaw blade. The knife that started the entire war when it was used in an assassination attempt against him as a child. He hands it to the girl he knows will end the long night, and then he says nothing about it. He performs ignorance. He wears it like a costume. And Daenerys? Oh, Daenerys. By the time she burns King's Landing, she has lost almost everyone she loves. Her dragons, her advisors, her sense of safety and belonging in a world that seems to reject her at every turn. The bells ring, the city surrenders, and something breaks inside her. The show frames it as madness finally blooming, like it was always going to happen, like her father's blood finally sang in her veins. But Bran saw it. He had to have seen it. He sees everything. He watched her walk toward the edge of that decision for episodes, for entire seasons of her life, and he said nothing. No warning, no counsel, no quiet word in the right ear at the right moment. Nothing. Because if Daenerys doesn't burn King's Landing, then the political landscape after the war looks completely different. Daenerys, as a beloved, victorious, arguably legitimate queen, is a Daenerys who sits the Iron Throne and stays there. And then Bran doesn't. The chaos had to happen, the tragedy had to play out. And the only being in that world who could see the tragedy coming, who could have altered its course by speaking a single sentence to the right person at the right time, chose silence. That is not passivity. That is the most active choice a person can make. Silence, in the presence of catastrophe you can see, and they cannot, is not neutrality. It is design. And so you're left with this: a boy who fell from a window, who was pushed by a man trying to protect a secret, who should have died but somehow didn't. Who crawled across the world in another boy's arms. Who sat beneath a tree and became something ancient and cold and vast. And who ends up, at the conclusion of the bloodiest story ever told, sitting on a throne made of the swords of dead men. He didn't swing one of those swords. He never had to. He just watched. He just waited. And in his silence, entire dynasties collapsed, cities burned, and the people who might have stopped him were arranged, beautifully, precisely, like pieces on a board, into positions from which they could never threaten him. So here's what you have to sit with tonight. If Bran Stark truly cannot change the past, then why does the past seem to bend toward him? And if he can change it, if that moment with Ned in the Tower of Joy is a door, just slightly ajar, into something far darker than the show ever admits, then what exactly did Bran Stark sacrifice to become the man who holds the story of the world? And more importantly, whose story was he always writing? This is the Story Chamber, where the fire burns slow and the shadows tell the truth.